Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin, and boy, am I sorry.
And Patrick Guerra is right there with you, Damon. Oh boy. Oh shit.
So, tonight, Patrick, we are talking about not Final Destination 4, mind you, the Final Destination. By the way, before we get started, can I just say, does it bug anyone else when they try these little tricks to change the name instead of just giving you the frickin' fourth film and saying it's part 4, the Final Destination? I hate when they do that. Boy, is it befitting for this movie.
Oh boy. I wish this were the Final Destination. I want this to desperately end. One movie is all it took. Damon, the Final Destination, starring the likes of McKelty Williamson as George, Haley Webb as Janet, Nick Zano as Hunt, Chantel Van Santen as Laurie, and Bobby Campo as Nick. As you mentioned, Damon, written by Eric Bress with characters by Jeffrey Reddick and directed by David R. Ellis. This movie, Damon, hold your fucking horses, had a budget of $40 million with a worldwide gross of nearly $187 million. This is the most successful in the Final Destination franchise. It is also, Damon, I'm not even mad that I'm spoiling this, easily so far the worst in the franchise that I've ever seen. I have never seen something careen off a cliff as quickly as between Final Destination 3 and the Final Destination, aka Final Destination 4. My God, what a pile of crap.
You know, it's funny. When we reviewed part 3, which you can go back and listen to that episode because it's available right now, we had a lot of criticisms of that film, but ultimately we said it's still a watchable movie. Like, there were still parts we liked.
Totally passable.
There were a lot of elements we didn't like. The script had issues. Some of the plot development was not there, and the characters were kind of very one-dimensional. But we still ultimately said, you know what? There were still some cool kills. You know, it was a watchable movie. It just wasn't on par necessarily with part 1 or 2. But guess what? That happens a lot when you get deep into a franchise. When you get to part 3, sometimes you're not always going to get a really strong film, and that's okay. We understood that, and we said it's a passable movie. We didn't hate it. We actually kind of enjoyed it, but we were just being critical of the flaws. I sat down to watch part 4, and I'd never seen this one before. And I do remember that this was the one in 3D, so I remembered that element of it. And I sat down to watch this, Patrick, and I started watching it, and I was just like, how did this happen? Like, how do you take such a simple formula, and even when we talk about part 3, vapid characters, no character development, the plot devices they used in part 3 were kind of dumb, and they tried way too hard to make it work, and it just never really worked. But, again, there were still elements to like about that one. But the formula of Final Destination is not hard to follow.
No.
Terrible accident, premonition stops it, saves some people, and then Death's design starts picking them off one by one, and you give us some really cool creative kills along the way. And then there's false hope because someone thinks they've stopped it, and then everyone dies, or inevitably it seems like everyone dies. That's kind of the Final Destination formula. And when you think about it, it's really not that hard to follow the pattern, right? It's color by numbers. But somehow the Final Destination just went colorblind, and they didn't even see the lines because it is just so far beyond a bad movie. It is remarkable. They should do a study. Somebody should conduct a study on how badly this film changed from the first 3.
Damon, I want to go one step beyond a study. There should be a federal investigation because I think money was severely laundered from this movie. I'm going to say it again. The budget was $40 million. That's a massive amount. I would be shocked if the Friday the 13th remake, which was a wildly successful movie and a very important movie for Warner Brothers, I would be shocked if it was as much money as that or just right around that. I would say that it's right around 40, 45, $50 million. The Final Destination, $40 million. I refuse to believe the money was spent on the movie. I refuse to believe that. I believe it was embezzled. I believe the money was laundered through this movie, and most of it was spent and is spent on islands somewhere in the Caribbean. I promise you, they did not put the money into the movie. They didn't even put the money into the actors. Like no offense to any of these actors, they're not big names. No, like at least in Final Destination 3, we had Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I do know Chantel Van Santen from The Boys, right?
Yep, she's in The Boys.
Yeah, she's in The Boys. So I know her. But she's not the biggest name. She's the biggest name in this group. And McKelty Williamson.
McKelty Williamson. I mean, he was in Forrest Gump, Heat. I mean, he's actually had some pretty big roles.
Yeah, I mean, but to be fair, he's like fifth on the call sheet. He's not one of the bigger names in the movie. And so it's like, okay, they didn't spend the money on the talent. They didn't spend the money on effects, which we are going to get to because holy shit. And by the way, the Final Destination series up to this point, the effects have been passable. So I was like, I don't understand why the effects took a massive nosedive here. And then I thought maybe this is a situation where like, oh, it was in the hands of new producers, which has happened with Nightmare on Elm Street. It's happened with Friday the 13th. And all of a sudden they kind of fumble the ball royally. No, Damon. I looked up the producers on this movie. Some of them are now like CEOs of Warner Brothers. They're like veterans of this of the Hollywood system. And the original producers and some of the directors and the writers, they're all from the franchise. What the hell happened? Where did that money go? I don't understand where that money went. Now, despite all that, Damon, it was a wild success. It was the highest grossing Final Destination movie of all time. It had the biggest box office opening of the entire franchise. This thing made them tons of money. Boy, oh boy, they made out. If someone stole that $40 million, doesn't matter. The studio got back 3-4-fold. Like they did very well on the back end. So they're not even worried about all that money. But Damon, none of it, I promise you, none of it went on screen. We're talking about, and I said this in my notes right away. I go, this is like watching like the CW show that comes on like Saturday night at like 11:30 that nobody watches. Like the quality of the cinematography, the quality of the acting. Damon, do you want to talk about the elephant in the room here? The CG in this movie. Again, it's a device. So please, enlighten the folks at home. The computer graphics in this movie are amongst the most offensive I've seen in something that had a budget larger than $30,000.
So I saw a really funny joke on Twitter a couple weeks ago. I'm a big, for those who don't know, I'm a very big Cincinnati Bengals fan. That's been my hometown team since I was a kid. Loved them to death. And during the start of NFL free agency, the Cincinnati Bengals were doing next to nothing. Now, granted, they've gone on to do great things since then, but at the beginning, I saw a message on Twitter. I cracked up and said, I'm going to need Elon Musk to send messages to the Cincinnati Bengals front office and ask them to explain what they do for their job. Because the government. Now, listen, the reality is this movie made money. How?
Big money.
I don't know.
I don't know.
That was my first thought. It's like, I feel like Elon Musk needs to send like letters to the people who made this movie and ask them to explain how they spent $40 million making this. Because I don't get it. And here I think is the most egregious error. And you talk about the effects, and that's where I'm going to here. I hate this, Patrick, because we try not to be critical and just be mean-spirited. I'm not trying to be mean-spirited.
Never.
But here's why I have to be very critical here. The director, David R. Ellis, who directed Final Destination 2. Go back and listen to that episode, Patrick.
We praised it.
Raved about the effects in that movie. For a movie that came out in whatever it was, like 2003, I think is when that one came out.
Yeah.
To have the effects and the digital effects and the practical effects kind of mixed, especially for the big log crash scene at the beginning, we marveled at how well that movie was made. We were actually like kind of shocked because that was the dicey time in movies, right around that early to mid 2000s when people were starting to use digital effects, but they just didn't have it down yet. And some of the movies are just really bad, and they aged so poorly because the effects were done so badly. The CGI, the early digital effects. We were shocked at how good that movie looked.
Yeah.
David R. Ellis, I'm sorry, buddy. I don't like to name drop and put it all on you. I'm sure it's not all on you.
Sure.
But how you can work with that film and do what you did on a smaller budget and then come into this one. Patrick, do you remember a video game when we were kids called Dragon Lair? Do you remember this?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like a cartoon, but it was not actually a video game. Like, they actually made you think you were playing a video game, but it was really just a cartoon. Like,
yeah, you're kind of watching a cartoon.
Yeah, but everyone's like, "Oh, this is the coolest video. It looks so awesome," because you're playing a cartoon. You're not really. You're pushing buttons, but it's really just a cartoon playing while you're there. There were moments watching this movie where the effects were so bad, the digital effects were so bad, I thought I was watching Dragon Lair from like 1984. It looked like a cartoon. Like the chains.
That's a huge insult to Dragon Lair, which looked way better than this.
Well, I'm just saying, like, it looked like a cartoon. Like, it didn't even look like bad digital effects. It almost looked like at one point when they had like a flying chain or a spear coming at you, whatever. And again, we're going to talk about the 3D of it all in a little bit. That's a whole other subject. But when you're everything in the movie in 3D has to come flying at you, okay? But I specifically remember a scene where there were chains. I can't remember what the scene was where there was chains involved. I don't remember exactly which one. The chains look so much like somebody just went in and drew them. Like they hired a comic book artist to just draw the chain. They didn't even look metal. Like they didn't even look metallic. Now, I understand, because we talked about this when we marveled at Final Destination 2, I understand they're not going to be perfect. It's not going to look like Avengers Endgame. I understand that. But even in my, like, let's make this our 2009 brain, it didn't work. None of it worked. It was so bad.
It looked like, it sort of reminded me of like the original Mortal Kombat, which I love, by the way. It's actually a really good movie. The only offense to that movie is that there's some really bad CG in it. Like a Reptile in particular was this like weird cartoon, like gremlin that made no sense, and it looked really bad. And I was like, oh, that doesn't hold up, and you can't like a lot of the stuff was like that, or even like, and I'm kind of a movie geek, so you'd have to forgive me for going down this road, but like sometimes I watch like how effects are made, like how they did the CG dragons for Game of Thrones, and you watch like the layers that they do. Well, sometimes like there's like a sub layer that just kind of looks like very smoothed over and cartoonish, and it's creating one like foundational layer of what they will eventually stack together to make what looks like a dragon that is actually in the room with somebody. It looked like they just used one of those sub layers instead of actually using the layer, like the finished layer. Maybe we need to investigate that company that did the computer graphics. I don't know, like who ripped somebody off here is what I want to know, because there's no way David R. Ellis he oversaw the graphics for part 2, and they look great. Did he just decide not to oversee the graphics this time? Did an executive say, "I'm handling this, David, take a hike. This is my project. I'm doing it." That happens too. I don't know where to place the blame. But so much of this movie revolves around it. Now the lead character Nick is the guy who has the vision at the racetrack. Him and his friends are sitting at a racetrack, and he has a vision of a terrible crash that kills a lot of people. It creates kind of like havoc and mayhem, and the building comes crashing down. Like a lot of bodies stack up on this one. And of course, Nick is like, "I see it. We need to run." And then, a scuffle ensues, and all hell breaks loose. And indeed, the thing happens. But they use, in this movie, in the first movie, it was Alex's visions. In the second movie, it was, I forget her name, but she had kind of these vague like visions in her brain. In the third movie, they used photos, and boy, we talked about how that didn't work. In this movie, they go back to visions, but now the visions are in CG. Why? I don't know. Maybe they were trying to utilize 3D or something. I'm not quite sure. They chose for him to have these like CG nightmares. And then, and those were the clues to what was going on, and they were atrociously bad. That's just one aspect of what's bad about this movie, Damon. There is lots more, but boy, the CG immediately screamed we had no budget. And I know that's not true. Even if that $40 million listing that I'm looking at on my IMDb Pro here, which is something you have to pay for to get proper information, I'm assuming we're very close. 40 million's got to be right around the ballpark. There's no way they spent it on that, or and if they did, somebody grifted them. Like, genuinely, somebody should go to jail for that.
You've seen a lot of the complaints recently about some of the Marvel films that have come out since Avengers Endgame, and one of the biggest complaints beyond the stories, which that's been a big complaint also, but the look of the movies, the CG, the digital effects, particularly I remember when Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania came out, and that was one of the biggest complaints, like the look of the film, the CG in the film. They're like, this just doesn't look good. Like, what happened? Because Avengers Endgame is like 98% CG, and it looks freaking amazing. Like, it looks amazing. That and Infinity War together, they look amazing.
Infinity War looks great, too.
And they made, billions of dollars. It's almost as if they're like, okay, we can take a break. We're not going to hire the good people. We're going to hire the B team. And you've heard the complaints. I mean, that's not the only one. It's happened in multiple Marvel films since Avengers Endgame, where people are like, what happened? Like, the CG in those movies were great. This is terrible. And that's, again, and the reason why Marvel takes so much flack for that is because they are spending $200 million on a movie. You're like, where's the money going? Like, I understand you have to pay, Robert Downey Jr. $1 billion to come back, and you have to pay this guy. We understand, like, there's a whole lot of star fucking going on in these movies. We understand that, but good Lord, like, can we balance it out with some decent looking effects? I think that's the most frustrating part because for the Final Destination, because when I watch early to mid 2000s horror films or even action films for that matter, I understand there are budget constraints and I understand some effects are not going to be as good as others. And a lot of times I can excuse it because I just get it. You don't have the budget to go out there and spend what you would spend. But you got to remember, this movie came out in 2009. Now I know digital effects change rapidly year to year, and they really do develop quickly between like 2010 and where we're at now in 2025. In the last 15 years, they've developed a lot. But I was thinking to myself, in 4 years after this was Iron Man, the first Marvel film that really looked amazing. Now, again, I understand that's a $100 million budget or whatever, but you got to remember, when Iron Man was made, that was an experiment.
Yeah.
They didn't put everything into that movie because it's like, we're not sure. We're betting on this guy, this troubled actor who's had a lot of run-ins with the law and drug problems and all this. We're hiring Robert Downey Jr. We're hiring the guy who made Swingers to be our director. He's not a proven action director, Jon Favreau. We're not going to give you the world to make Iron Man. You're going to make it on what is considerably a lower budget for Marvel. And let's see what happens. And that movie looks phenomenal. Now, again, I understand they still had more money, and it is 4 years later, and a lot can change in 4 years. But you had $40 million. And we know, I'm sorry to the cast, we know that didn't go to you. They didn't pay 40. No. They didn't pay 30. There's no $10 million star in the Final Destination.
I doubt $1 million went collectively to the cast. I really do. Like, I doubt they paid that much money to the cast.
And this is not an insult. I'm not saying this to be insulting. I doubt that money went to the director and the writer. And you know what I'm saying? Like, if you hire Martin Scorsese, yeah, you're going to pay Martin Scorsese a boatload of money. Like, when you do Killers of the Flower Moon, even though that money did make a boatload of money at the office, you're at the box office, you're still going to pay Martin Scorsese a big nut. You're going to pay Leonardo DiCaprio a big nut because you know their names and the recognition of what they're going to bring to your movie. Not only for box office awards, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know that going in. None of that exists here. So I'm with you in saying I don't know where the money went. So, like, all the little pieces where you can start to pick apart and say, well, you paid for an A-list star. Well, you paid for an A-list director. Well, you paid for whatever. None of that is present here.
No.
Where did the money go? And I know if your biggest part of the budget was done to digital effects, can you get the money back? Can you sue to get the money back? Because It's mind-boggling how bad this movie looks.
Well, that's how it looks, Damon. Now, how does it walk? Right? Like we see what it looks like, but now we gotta get into what's even rougher, which is the story of it all. I think one of the major problems that we're running into now in the later sequels is like, how do you get your characters to understand the mechanics of this all? Now they are fully separated from the likes of Alex. They are fully separated from the likes of Clear Rivers. There's a little Clear Rivers Easter egg if you notice it. I know you did. But otherwise, like, these are just basically brand new characters who don't know anything about this. So they have to relearn the world. They have to re-understand it. They're even farther removed from the characters in part three. The way they do this with Nick and his visions, it really feels like the writers just gave up. And I say the writers, it was one writer, Eric Bress, who, by the way, I was like, maybe Eric Bress doesn't have a great catalog. Wrong. He's got his catalog is good. He's a very professional, very pro writer. I don't know if the studio came in and said, you're changing this and you're changing that. We're going to dumb this down or whatever. They didn't even try this time. Genuinely, this time it was like, hey, I got this weird hunch that I think death is coming. And I mean, in the middle of the movie, people are just like, okay. And they just go along with him. Like there's no conflict. There's no push. There's no pull. He's just like, I think I'm seeing this. And they go, okay, great. And they all just go that way. They take time to like do even the directing in this. It's like, let's make sure we get a long wide shot of like, the front of this coffee shop for no real good reason other than to show the sign. There's just all this time wasting. And this is a breezy movie, 82 minutes. You could cut 40 minutes out of this movie right now and not lose any of the story because the story's barely there. It's barely this guy, Nick, just walking around going, I think this is going to happen. And his friend's just going, okay. Help me with this story, Damon. Help me. What did you had to have seen something I didn't see.
Okay. Let me say this. I'll admit, I try my absolute best, even in the movies I don't love, to pay razor close attention for this reason. Because as you know, has been well documented on this show, I'm the story guy. I'm the writer. This is my job as a profession. So I always try to get those little nuances when I watch a movie. When I watch Final Destination, The Final Destination, I keep wanting to call it Final Destination 4. The Final Destination.
That's what it is.
Yeah, The Final Destination. I admit I was stunningly shocked by how bad it looked, that I may have been a little distracted. But the two things I noticed, one, there is no half man. There is no Bloodworth. There is no one here to explain what's happening to them. And that was a commentary in part 1 and part 2. And part 3, they kind of figured it out on their own. There was no half man in part 3. There was no Bloodworth in part 3. But they still, with the pictures, as bad of as a mechanism as it was, they at least explained it. Right?
Yeah.
There's no explanation here, Patrick. None. He starts having these visions. Nick starts having these visions of these things and the people dying. They don't even bother to explain the idea that there's a design to death.
No.
It feels like, and this is just my, this is my brain at work here trying to come up with an explanation. And boy, am I comparing this to a much better movie. But it's almost like when they made Spider-Man Homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we're done with the origin story. He got bit by a radioactive fucking spider and he became Spider-Man. We're not doing it again. And James Gunn has already said, when you see the new Superman movie, we're not doing you land on Krypton, he meets the Kents. You know the story. We're not going to spend
He's already
an hour.
Superman.
Yeah, there are certain characters you do need to do that, like Iron Man. People didn't know the fuck Iron Man was 2 decades ago. Like, unless you were a hardcore comic book fan, you didn't know Iron Man. You know what I mean? But everyone knows Superman's story, everyone knows Batman's story, everyone knows Spider-Man's story. Let's move the fuck on. it almost felt like they're like, you know what? These are savvy Final Destination fans. They know desk design and they know how this whole thing works. So even if we don't have the connective tissue, no Clear, no Alex, nobody from any of these other movies, they'll just figure it out. And so that's what they do. They don't explain it. They don't ever acknowledge it. Never. They never acknowledge it in this movie to say death is coming for us or death's design or if it skips us, it moves on. They just say it. They just say it like they knew. And I was like, did I miss something? Like, that's what I'm saying to you, Patrick. Did I black out from the bad effects? And I missed when they explained it because it just seemed like they just knew.
You sneeze and you'll miss how they explain it. Like it's hidden in some of the laziest dialogue that I've seen in quite some time. I was realizing as I was watching this, I was like, it's been a really long time since you and I have reviewed a proper stinker. Like we tend to watch very competent movies, even if we don't like them. That we can tell you why we don't like them, but they're competently made. There was just this little, like, after I think the MILF death, and that is what they call her. There's a I think her name is Samantha or something, but they call her the MILF. And she was supposed to die at the racetrack, and they save her, and except they don't. I believe she's one of the first deaths. Right after that, while that ordeal is going on, and you're dealing with her at the salon, and there's like a lot of misdirection about what's going to happen at the salon to kill her, and it turns out to just be a stone goes through a lawnmower and cracks her in the eyeball, and she's dead. During that time, completely off camera, Nick says, this has happened to others. That's what he says. It's like a throwaway line. And then he says this, and I had to write it down. Some say the chain can be broken.
Wait,
Damon.
They just know.
Damon, some say the chain can be broken. And I was like, what is that? What do you mean, some say? And they all just went, uh-huh. And they just follow him along. This is how they explained the movie. That was how we got through it. Like, literally with him just going like, I have these visions, and some say the chain can be broken. I was like, holy shit. They went from like having Bloodworth and Clear Rivers to some say. But you needed that. Whoever some was needed to be in this movie to have a semblance of like anything remotely realistic going on.
Your explanation, I did hear that, but the thing is, like, that's what I was saying though, is like they just knew. Like right. Even them saying some say, they never explain it. They just knew it. That's what that's what I'm talking about. Like it felt like I was watching that episode of Succession where Greg goes before Congress and they're asking him questions and he can't just speak English. He's like, well, if it is to be, it shall be had. And they're like, what? And he's like, if you will it, it will be. And I had it. And they're like, what are you talking? Like he could not complete full sentences. He sounded like an idiot. That's what I thought I was watching here. They're just like, so some say it happened. I'm like, what? They just knew.
And even if they had given me the investigative moment where like they're sitting there in front of their computer, which they did in part 2 and they kind of did in part 3, where they go, oh, this has happened, Flight 180. Oh, and these kids, like, they really just went like, yeah, this happened to other people. Some say the chain can be broken. And I was like, boy, if you were like looking at your phone, or you were looking for, like, you were in the movie theater at that time and you were like looking around your chair for the M&Ms you might have dropped, you missed how they figured out how this movie works. They wave it off in some of the laziest dialogue I've ever seen. And it's another sin is like just talking your plot out, like just talking it out instead of like trying to make it a thing, make the characters act. Instead of acting, they're just talking about whatever that it is that needs to be done. And then the characters around them are just like, cool, we'll go with it. No one questioning a thing, and they kind of keep moseying along because they got to get through this plot. That's basically how it was written, where it was like, hey, we're just not going to question anything. We're just going to move with you through this plot until we get to the end.
Well, and that's what I'm like when even again with your line, like the fact that they just knew. And that's what I'm saying. Like they didn't. Not only did they not explain it, I don't know that they ever tried to understand it or make you understand. Make you understand that they understood it. They just say it. They never show. It's like when you were in school and you do a math test and your teacher says, "Show your work." You know what I'm talking about? Show your work.
Yeah.
These kids are just like not showing their work at all. They're just like, oh yeah, we know the answer. Okay, but how did you get there? We have no fucking clue how you got there.
Yeah, and it is a complicated idea to explain.
And even if they just took it back to the plot of the first film, and you eliminate Bloodworth, which I know that's a big part of the first film, but even if the characters start dying off, and they realize just in the simplest of terms that death is coming for them. It's coming back around. They don't necessarily need to figure out the order or saving them skips one. I'm not even saying they need to go that far. Just figuring out after like 3 people die to say, oh my gosh, we're being stalked by death. Because now it's killed the mom and the dad and the kids and they're all dead. And now the guy sitting next to him is dead. It's making a beeline back towards us in the rows of the seats. I know that sounds really dumb because guess what? It is dumb. But if you just at least get it to that simple of a term, it would make sense. But they didn't even go for that. They just knew. And that's why I say, like, when you're right, that throwaway line, some say but again, even saying some say, you're acknowledging that you just know the answer. You didn't show your work. You didn't show your work. You didn't show how you got there. You have no idea how you got there. And that was the most frustrating part. And again, I almost feel like this is the producers and the studio. And again, this thing made a boatload of money.
Yep.
It just felt like these people don't need to know anything else. They know the origin story. Give them some cool deaths. And guess what? And now we got to talk about it, Patrick. Give them 3D. They don't give a fuck about how you get there. They're going to have glasses on. They're going to be munching popcorn. They don't give a fuck how you get from point A to point B as long as you give them some cool deaths and some shit flying at them. I honestly believe that's how simplistic they looked at this movie.
And 3D was becoming a big thing then. It was the resurgence of 3D in the theaters was big. And why was it big, Damon? For no other reason than this. You can charge more money. It's a special feature. So you charge more for it. You want to see 3D? Cool. Your ticket was $12, now it's $17. We just made a whole lot more money. And it worked. I mean, and you couldn't get through any movie without being 3D. They were converting in the post-production process. They weren't even shooting these for 3D. They were literally, there was a place down here in San Diego that was their only job, was to take a movie and convert it to 3D because it was way cheaper than trying to shoot it 3D. You have to have twice the cameras. You have to have a bunch of other things that you need to put into consideration when you shoot it live. Well, some tech company figured out we could just convert it in post, and they looked terrible. Any converted 3D movie usually looked like shit. You have to shoot it for 3D to make it look good. They didn't. You know, this gimmick has come back around multiple times. The idea of 3D, it has never enhanced a movie, except for one. Friday the 13th Part 3 3D is a better movie if you watch it in 3D because it's also a ridiculous and cheesy movie. This is a ridiculous and cheesy movie, but it lacks like the tactile, handmade feel of a Friday the 13th Part 3. So you've lost that. It lacks like a lore because they kind of throw it out the window. They're like, never mind the lore. Let's just get them through this movie, however they need to get through it. Scooby-Doo characters without any personality. Let's just do that. And you're like, okay, well, so what are we exactly grabbing onto here? And the studio goes, a boatload of fucking cash. This is a classic example of a cash grab. It really, by the way, it worked. You want to talk shit on cash grabs? They're cash grabs for a reason. The studio made boatloads of money off of this.
We're all horror fans here, so I don't feel like I'm going to be.
We are?
Like, yes. I don't want. When I say this, I don't feel like I'm going to be insulting a large portion of our audience by saying this, but I hate 3D. Now, when I was a kid, and I remember when Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare came out, and I think whatever that was, 1993 or whatever it was. I was still a kid at that point, and that was coming out in 3D. Now, I was a big Nightmare on Elm Street fan. I was a Freddy fan. They're like, oh my God, it's coming in 3D. Now, I feel like I remember seeing Jaws 3D in the theater as a littler kid, but I have very vague memories of that. I have strong memories of seeing Freddy's Dead. Now, at that time, I don't remember how old I was. 10, I had to do the math here, but whatever it was, 12, 13, 14 years old. When I saw that movie, in my head, I was like, this is awesome. You get to see Freddy's head coming at you and the blow. And there's like two very specific scenes in Freddy's Dead where it says put on your glasses, where they do it in the movie. So it's like 5 to 10 minutes of 3D. And in that moment, you're like, oh, this is kind of cool. And again, to a 12-year-old mind or 13-year-old mind at the time, I was like, this is freaking awesome. And then I remember when 3D started getting big again. And I went to see, because at that time, you couldn't avoid it. Like, if you wanted to go see a movie that was just in 3D, you were going to go see it in 3D. Now, as you clearly see, I wear glasses, and when I would go see a lot of 3D movies, the first couple I saw, it would just give me a headache. And so I'm like, I'm not going to see these movies anymore because it just gives me a headache to sit there. But there was one movie that came out during that time that had 3D, and it was My Bloody Valentine, the remake.
I've seen it.
It was all in 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so bad. And the 3D is so bad. And it gave me such a migraine watching that stupid movie. And
that's one of the few I didn't hate in 3D. That's funny.
What I'm saying is to me, there is no redeeming quality because you have to make a movie look a certain way. Cheesy effects have to come flying at the screen constantly. And as soon as you don't have the 3D, which, yes, they did make 3D televisions. Remember when that thing exploded for about 10 minutes when they actually were selling 3D TVs? When you watch that same movie at home, it all looks so incredibly cheesy that every single action piece has a car, a boat, a tire, a knife, something flying directly at the screen. It always looks bad. 3D is terrible. And I don't want to insult a portion of our audience that maybe they love 3D, but for me personally, I fucking hate 3D. And this movie is like the biggest example of how it just does not work.
It's bad, Damon. And I will again at the poker table of bad movie decisions, I will raise you the writing in this movie. The 3D is egregious. You're not wrong. The CG, unacceptable. Period. The writing in this movie still trumps everything for me. It really does. And I'm going to give you just a few examples here. One of the characters, Hunt, who's sort of the douchebag, he's sort of the stifler of the group. All he cares about is getting laid. He's walking around the pool after he just boned super hard with some chick, and he gets mad at a kid for squirting him with water at a pool, Damon. How stupid is that? He's wearing swim trunks, and a kid squirts him with a water gun, and that sets off the whole scene is because a kid squirted him with a water gun at a pool. That's just bad writing. That's just somebody going, let's throw that away. That's one bad thing. Another thing, okay, there's this car wash sequence. This girl gets stuck in a car wash. They have a vision that water is going to be the problem. Again, total hunch. And it's George and I believe Laurie. They're on a desperate hunt because Nick has told them it has to do with water, so figure it out. And Janet calls them, and she's stuck at a car wash. She goes, "I'm at a car wash. Help!" End of call. George, the security guard who's helping them out, goes, "I think there's a car wash up the street. Let's go there and try that." Oh, just on a hunch. They don't know where she's at. This is pre-Google Maps and shit like that. They literally just know she's at a car wash. So they drive to the first car wash they think might be around. That is literally how they solve that problem, and then they show up there. That's another thing. Later on, we learn George had killed his wife and children in a drunk driving accident. Super fucking dark. But, he's like, hey, I'll accept death as my thing. Go ahead and just let me be the next one to die. He chooses to take himself out. And he goes home and he tries to kill himself all day long and it doesn't work. When they show up, he's hanging and then his rope falls. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then he goes, I guess I just can't kill myself. Next scene is them popping a bottle of champagne because they don't understand what's going on. So they're like, I guess we're just invincible. And they move on with their lives. It's on the level that the writing in these moments is on the level of like, you must think the audience are complete and utter fucking dillweeds. Like, it's so lazily just like, let's just move on from this. Let's not even think about why this is so stupid. Scene after scene after scene in this movie is so insufferably stupid, I could forgive the 3D. It's so insufferably stupid, I could forgive the bad CGI. If you had given me a great story, but they refused to do that, Damon. They just were like, no, let's make this story suck so hard and show that we gave so little of a shit about the audience, treating the audience like they are absolute dopes and giving the actors like zero to chew on. Like, that offended me more than all those other things combined.
Can I see your George trying to hang himself and raise you a mechanism used for one of the death scenes? Because I talked about in part 3, one of my biggest problems is when you really, like, they're really twisting and turning the mechanics to get to these elaborate death scenes. And again, I know it kind of started with part 1, but they really start going off the rails in part 3 of like,
yes.
I joked in the last episode, like, something always is falling or something is spilling. And that always leads to the death scenes. And it's like these really elaborate, like, dominoes have to fall. Now, I'm not a construction worker. I've never been a construction worker. I do have family members and friends who worked in construction, though.
Sure, yeah. I've done a little construction in my day.
Can I just ask, and maybe there's a listener out there who will say, Damon, you're wrong. And you know, if I'm wrong, I'll gladly, I'll retract my statement.
Email us.
Yeah. But a movie theater under construction where they're building new screens.
I know where you're going with this.
From my understanding, and maybe this is out of nowhere, I don't believe that you would have like 90 gallons or 90 drums of flammable material just like hanging out back there for no fucking apparent reason. They have like giant drums of, is it gasoline? I don't know what it is. It's obviously flammable material. Like, it is it looks like a full on Breaking. Have you seen in Breaking Bad when they build the meth lab and there's like these big vats of that methylamine they use? It literally looked like that in the back of what they're supposed to be building. They're not building seats. They're not building a screen. They're not building a concession stand. They've got like 90 giant drums of flammable material backstage building a fucking movie. What the fuck are you doing? Who came up with this idea?
They have a megaton worth of explosives behind a movie screen for no fucking reason, and a construction worker with Coke bottle glasses. Now, Damon, you wear glasses. I probably need to wear glasses, but a man with glasses that thick needs them on. That means he can't fucking see for shit, and he leaves them there and goes home after a long day of work. And I was like, first of all, that makes no sense. The man would not be able to walk anywhere. He clearly can't see. With those Coke bottle glasses, he needs them on all the time. But anyway, he leaves them there because we're idiots, you and me. We could just sit here and accept that, how stupid that is. So fine. He leaves them there. A ray of sunlight goes through them and ignites, I don't know, Damon, 70 pounds of sawdust that are just piled up on the floor, because that's another thing that definitely happens. You don't have like your low-level construction worker that like sweeps that shit up at the end of the day. No. We just leave it in a giant pile. It ignites and then sets off a bomb that levels an entire mall, because that's how much explosives you keep behind a movie theater screen. I'm glad you knew where I was going with that one, because as I'm watching it, I'm like, I turned to my girlfriend and I was just like, I paused the movie and I was like, do you have any idea why there are like 90 drums of flammable material at a fucking movie theater? This isn't a gas station. This isn't like a petroleum outlet. This isn't 45,000 gallons. 45,000 gallons of flammable liquid behind a movie theater screen. Why? Like, why? I have no idea why they're there. But I'm going to tell you one thing I like about this scene. Now, Damon, it sets off this incredible trigger of events that turns out to be an illusion. It turns out to be a vision in Nick's mind. So he goes in there. He stops it all from happening in, by the way, another very ridiculous way. Like, he gets nail gunned. His arm gets nail gunned to the wall, and so he can't, like, he has to reach for something to shut off the or to start the
and can I throw out one little caveat? Can I throw out one little caveat? So he tries to start it by pulling the fire alarm,
right?
And the fire alarm is disconnected. Now, again, I'm not a construction worker and I'm not a serious electrician, but wouldn't it stand to reason that if the fire alarm isn't working, why the fuck are the sprinklers working? Because he then
I don't know. That's above my pay grade. I couldn't tell you.
But wouldn't you imagine one would be connected to the other? Like, if you can't pull the fire alarm, would the sprinklers not? I don't know.
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I would think that the sprinklers have like a little heat sensor on them, so that if flames hit them, that they would go off. Like something would break. I don't know. Again, plumbing's not my expertise. But eventually he, in a very dramatic fashion, does stop the bomb from going off. All by himself, with no one to witness him, like very undramatic, like very, very just like a very throwaway moment in the movie. And that's the end. Like, it's kind of the end. It's the end where like there was no dramatic saving of the day. That all happened in like the Vision instead. In the Vision, he was trying to save the day and it all crashed to shit. And then he saves it all by his lonesome in a very undramatic fashion. And then they just cut to 2 weeks later, and they all get run over by a truck that crashes into their favorite coffee shop. And you're just like, what the fuck? Like, I was like, this is not going to end here, right? And it just ended there. And I was like, these guys think I'm a fucking asshole, don't they? To make a movie this bad and call it a day and just go, yep, we did it. Congratulations. You sat through our movie. I go, what the fuck?
Also, and I know it is the vision of the death in the mall, but I understand you just set off like 90 megatons of whatever the flammable material that was just hanging out backstage.
Levels an entire mall.
But like all the weird deaths that happen after that, it's not from the explosion. There's people like running and then weird shit starts happening. But the one that made me just be like, all right, like this is I'm just over it, is when the escalator breaks apart and his girlfriend gets eaten in the gears and the mechanism of the escalator. Now listen, if this had been an earthquake and there's like a giant chasm opens up and she falls into it, like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade style, okay, I can see that. But this 90 megaton explosion not only levels the mall, but it levels the escalator so badly that it opens up like this giant mechanism inside. Now, I've seen the inside of escalators. They don't look anything the fuck like that. And it literally chews her to pieces. I think...
Can I tell you the stupidest part of that? Can I tell you the stupidest part of the escalator scene? Please, and that's all part of his delusion. It's her leg gets caught in it first, which makes sense. And it starts to crush her leg. Immediately, she starts spitting up blood.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Why did she immediately start spitting up blood as her ankle's being crushed? Like that, there's no correlation between your ankle being crushed and like your internal bleeding. Like that's not. And, I was like, and also, they think I'm an asshole.
I watched Mallrats enough to know that you can get injured in an escalator. That kid is dark on the escalator. We've seen that.
Yes.
But a foot getting caught in an escalator and getting kind of mangled. Okay, I could see that.
I'll buy it.
But they act like this escalator is one of those steel crushing machines, you know what I'm talking about? Where they feed debris down into it and it crushes everything.
Damon, it's the same way we killed Michael Myers in Halloween Ends.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the shredder. It's like a metal shredder. I don't know the technical term for it, but it's like a giant metal shredder. And it's meant to crush, like you can crush a car. That's how strong these gears are that you can crush in there. It's a fucking escalator. It's not that.
No, Damon, it's the mangler.
It
It
is
is literally
the
the
jaw. It
most
is literally
destructive jaws
it
of
is like
death.
it is the jaws of death. I'm like, what? Like, again, I understand it's the dream sequence and all that, but I'm just like, literally mushes her entire body. Now, I'm not a mechanic, but I've not really seen a whole lot of mechanisms that can crush a fucking human body into mush like that, unless it is one of those specifically designed mechanisms. Not an escalator. Not an escalator.
It was one of my favorite kills, as stupid as it was. I was like, yeah, it looks pretty good. Like it's one of the few moments where the CG looked all right.
I mean, at least, like I said, I can forgive her spitting up blood from her foot getting injured. That's, yeah. but, but then literally just like grinding her into bits and pieces. And I was like, couldn't we have come up with something better? I mean, I know we already suspended disbelief about 5 minutes ago with the 9,000 drums of flammable material at the building construction site of a movie theater. But couldn't we have come up with something like, at least, George, they just did the old Death from Part 1 where he just gets run over. I was like,
right.
If I'm McKelty Williams and I'm just like, dude, how did I end up here? How was I next to Al Pacino like 5 years ago, 10 years ago in fucking Heat, one of the greatest movies ever made? How did I go from that to this? And I feel like he just told them,
Gambling
you know what, get me out of here. And they're like, sure, we're not going to give you a cool creative death. You're just going to get hit by a moving, like an ambulance. You're just going to die that way. He's like, fine, I'm out. And that's because he gets like the least interesting death. And I'd be like, that'd be fine because everyone else gets these super elaborate, really stupid deaths. And he just gets the old, the old scene from Part 1 where the bus, except this time it's an ambulance. But I'm kind of like, I feel like he got the easiest out of this whole movie.
Oh, I'm sure it was a half day of shooting in front of a green screen. They're like, just run at the camera. We'll do it a couple of times and see if it works. And that was it. And then they just composited him into the scene, and then the fucking ambulance mows him over. He got the easy way out because I think our poor girl who gets eaten slowly by an escalator, she probably had to shoot that for at least a week.
Oh my God. It's just so mind-boggling. Patrick, should we talk about categories, I guess?
There are categories, Damon. I'll say that much.
So we're going to kick things off, and let me be honest and say this is a sliding scale of best performance in the Final Destination. Patrick, this is like, remember that class you had in school where the teacher was like, we'll just kind of get the average of the grades, we'll get like the average, that's how you get like the curve, and like when everyone, like all the dumb kids kind of like evened out the smart kids, and everyone, like all you had to get was like a C average to get like an A plus. Do you remember those grades?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So when I say best performance, let me just be honest and say I'm kind of grading on a scale here. So Patrick, who gets your best performance in this one?
Oh boy. Listen, at the end of the day, and I do mean this, I do with all sincerity, bad performances are actually not usually the problem. The problem is usually the script and the directing. And in this instance, it 100% was. I had a lot of trouble finding a great performance in this movie because the directing and the writing were not up to snuff. But my best performance goes to Nick Zano, who played Hunt. Now, Hunt is not in the movie for much. He's not a big factor in the movie. He just plays a horny douchebag. He's their horny douchebag friend who is just like, hey, we didn't get killed at the thing, so I guess we're lucky. We're good to go. I got my lucky coin. I'm going to go get laid. You know what? I fuck with Hunt's philosophy. I'm still alive, so I'm just going to go get laid. I'm not going to worry about all this. He had the right idea. That is what the character should be doing in a movie of this quality. Just go get laid. That's what he did. And so I'm giving him the award for just living his truth, Damon.
Yeah, but remember we talked about problematic characters in Part 3? They didn't quite go away in Part 4. He didn't quite go away.
He's problematic, but at least he's making sense.
Yeah. Listen, and to be honest, and I will give credit. I am actually a fan of Chantel Van Satten, who went on to become like a solid actor in her own right. Again, we mentioned she was in The Boys. She's been in a lot of other things as well. Like she's done like FBI shows. She was in a show I watched called Scorpion. She's done a lot of things, so she's actually pretty accomplished, and I do like her a lot. I would say that this was probably very early on in her career. This is her Renee Zellweger, Matthew McConaughey, Texas Chainsaw Massacre New Generation role. So I do like her a lot, but I just went with this because I didn't really have a great option here. I did go with McKelty Williamson as George, and not necessarily because it's the greatest performance, but like, again, in a grading scale of not so great.
Is this more of a lifetime achievement award?
This is like we you deserve better than this, McKelty, so we're just gonna give you the award because he's fucking awesome in Heat. He's great in Forrest Gump. He's great in Con Air. He's amazing in Justified, the TV show. So this is just like.
But what about here, Damon?
You were in Heat. You were in Forrest Gump. You were in Con Air. You were in Justified. You're getting my award for best performance because you were in Heat. You were.
It's just the Lifetime Achievement Award. Fair enough.
Yeah. So go watch Heat. He's great in Heat. He's fucking awesome in Heat. Heat's great. Patrick, next category. Thank God. We're moving on. Oh, Jesus, this gets worse. We're going to MVP. So Patrick, who gets your MVP for the Final Destination?
Oh shit!
I can't even get through saying the category.
Well, Damon, for all the talk we just did about performances, I truly am going to give my MVP to the cast of The Final Destination because how they didn't just walk off set going, this is absolutely dog shit dumb. They were probably getting SAG scale. I'm guessing like that. None of these names, maybe McKaylee, he might have gotten a little bit more money than the rest. Everybody else was probably working for about $750 a day. I'd have just been like, I guess I really need this money for them to power through what they knew was going to be a terrible movie. I doubt they got points on the back end. Maybe they did. If they did, good for them. Then no wonder you don't see them working anymore because they're just like, we made a shit ton of money working on that movie. So thank you very much. But they powered through a very rough script, a very, very rough script. And I think like that's kind of an actor's worst nightmare is like, I'm going to be in something that's bad and they know it and they do it anyway. So my MVP goes to the cast for just stomaching this thing.
So my MVP award, I didn't name names because I don't want, I'm kind of living by like the omerta rule, where you just don't say this out loud. So I didn't want to name names, but my MVP goes to the accountant on the Final Destination. Now you're saying, Damon, how does the accountant get this award? Because I don't know how, I don't know where, but somehow that $40 million went to something other than this movie. Someone's driving a boat, someone's driving a Porsche, someone's buying a house. Maybe it's the accountant, maybe it's the director. It's like Shawshank Redemption when the warden is like filtering money through different avenues. Right. There's like a fake guy attached to it all, but he's actually getting the money. Whoever the Andy Dufresne was of this movie, who figured out, hey, we got $40 million. There's a college student with a computer who said he'll do all the effects for $40. Okay, cool. We're going to write that off as $20 million. The cast is taking SAG scale. For people who don't know what that is, it's SAG-AFTRA, the union, the actors union. You have to get a minimum scale. Minimum's like, as you said, like $750 a day. That's like the minimum you can pay an actor for a leading role in a film. They're like, okay, they're getting that. Okay, we're going to write off as $750,000.
Right.
Okay, so whoever Andy Dufresne the shit out of this movie to just pilfer and somehow make it seem like they spent $40 million, but really they spent like $2 million and $38 million got pocketed somewhere else. Kudos, dude. You earned your paycheck.
I promise you, David R. Ellis loves the accountant on this movie. The director of this movie is just like, thank you, Dufresne. I'm gonna go sit on my yacht now. Yeah, seriously. Next category, best death. Now, again, there's a formula to follow here. They never tell you how that formula works. Some say there is a formula to these movies, Patrick. What is the best death in The Final Destination? There are better deaths than this one, but there are little more satisfying than this one, and I called it "Burn Nazi Scum." There is a very needlessly Nazi character in this movie that drives me nuts. I hated that the character was in the movie. He is the first to go once they figure out that they've survived this massacre. He's the first one to go. He does go in a rather crazy fashion. He's going to the security guard's house because he's racist. He wants to go to the security guard's house and burn a cross in front of his house. And death comes for him, ends up hooking him to his own tow truck and dragging him on fire down the street. So I was just like, yeah, there are better deaths in this movie, but there are none more satisfying than watching a Nazi get dragged through the street on fire. So I went with that one.
I understand that, like, you have to have unnecessary characters in films sometimes, but, like, the fact that they just decided to make a black security guard and then an ultra racist goer,
Yeah.
and he literally drops a racial epithet in the movie for no reason.
Unnecessary.
I'm just like, why was this here? Like, who decided this was a good idea? Like,
he could have just been an asshole.
Yeah.
He didn't
Like,
need to be a
assholes.
Nazi.
He didn't need, and he literally had a swastika tattoo on his arm.
You know what really pissed me off about this character? He listened to like death metal, and I was like, no, fuck you. Like, what they're saying is guys like that listen to death metal. I'm like, no. Death metal, a lot of cool people listen to it. He's Nazi scum. Like, just make him bad because of that. Don't go dragging death metal listeners into this shit. I hate when they do that.
So, and when I say this is my best death, people are going to say you're taking a cop out because you're saying it was an easy one. It's not. Actually, the one death in this movie that I commend them for is because, like I said, as these films have gotten more and more convoluted, the death scenes are just so far from being believable. It just gets ridiculous. Like I said before, again, I understand they started in the first one with Todd's death. That's a little, incredulous, but they just get so much more elaborate as time goes on, where it's like all these different mechanisms have to happen to kill someone. And the one death that was just like kind of satisfying and a little shocking was George just getting hit by the ambulance. He went back to the first one where the girl got hit with the bus, and I was just like, thank you. Like, I'm not saying that it all needs to be that way, but it just felt like it's like the escalator and the 90 drums of, flying. Like, they really have to go out of their way to create these elaborate death scenes. And sometimes simple still works. So when George gets plowed by the ambulance and then he realizes, then Nick realizes his dream and then it happens again, I'm just like, cool. Because it's just simple. Sometimes you just got to stick that one in there or two in there so it's just not so fucking out there. So I actually commend them for doing the George death with just a simple ambulance plowing him over, and they show like the aftermath in the one scene where you go where you just see his guts and stuff on the road. And I'm like, cool. Very simple, very easy, and you actually tried to give us a little bit of shock factor. So I gave that one the best death in this movie.
Fair enough, Damon.
Would you like now to talk about the worst death? Because, boy, are there some of those in this movie.
I would love to. And this one's the most important one of all. And that is the racetrack CGI massacre, Damon. I knew that's the one thing I knew about this movie. I was like, oh, what I know is that the big disaster is this like incident at a racetrack, which, by the way, that stuff has really happened. And it's actually a really awful thing. And it's certainly happened in the past. What I was so shocked at is that this is the opener of the movie. This is how you're going to kick this movie off. And as this disaster is unfolding, it's setting a precedent. It's setting a tone right away. And the CG, there's so many moments where like people are running and then like CG cement like falls on them, and it's so clearly just like a slab of CG cement flattens a group of people running by. It looked so bad, but not only did it look so bad, it was like how the movie started. And so I was just like, man, they're really setting a precedent right here. And it pissed me off. I was like, this is the best the movie's going to have to offer. And it looks like garbage.
That was pretty bad. But once again, Patrick, I'll see your bad racetrack scene and I'll raise you a guy getting his intestines sucked out by a pool filter through his asshole. Your boy, what was his name? Hunt?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought his name should have been Buck, like he was in Kill Bill. I'm Buck and I'm here to fuck.
Yeah.
He he goes down in the pool to find his lucky coin, which, by the way, lucky coin, it's 2009 at this point. Lucky coin, really? Like, that's what that's
yes.
the device.
Lucky
that's
coin.
the device we're going to use. Why don't we just have the pet rock while we're at it? He drops his lucky coin into the pool after fighting with the kid over the water gun. He jumps in to find it, and that's when the pool drain mechanism gets switched on, and he gets sucked down to the bottom of the pool, so the filter thing starts pulling him down. Now, I understand that a pool drainage system would be rather strong. I get that. I can understand that. But Hunt literally gets stuck on the thing to the point where he can't get broken free. Okay, again, hypothetically, let's just say it's strong enough to do that, and the suction is so strong. Now, again, I have a hard time believing that. You're literally sitting down. You can't push off a little bit, because remember, once you break a seal, you break free. Have you ever felt a vacuum? Like when you break the vacuum, you can break. That's how it works. Okay, but again, if you just have Hunt die by drowning, okay, he got stuck. You know, he couldn't get free. He drowned. Okay, but no. The suction is so strong it not only held him there, but it literally sucked his intestines out his asshole. I'm not being crude by saying this. It literally sucked his intestines through his asshole and then spurted them out on the other end of the filter. Patrick, I'm all for suspending disbelief, and I'm all for ridiculous deaths, but this one was beyond anything I've ever seen, and I was just like, this is the dumbest shit.
Yeah.
Whoever came up with this idea, like, I want to meet them, and after I get done punching David Gordon Green for making Halloween Ends, I'm going to punch this guy.
Yeah, it was that one made my notes. So I go, I don't know why I should believe this. Like, it just, they couldn't even sell it well. Like, it was rough, Damon. This was a rough watch. Overall, this was a very rough watch.
It sucked his I can't. Oh, man.
Who knows what Bloodlines and Final Destination 5 are going to be like? I have to imagine the Final Destination is going to be at the bottom of our rankings when we are done talking about this franchise.
They sucked his oh my God, I can't.
Yes, Damon. Some say your butthole can be the conduit for horror.
Apparently so. Last category, thank God. Is it Final Destination-y? Patrick, the Final Destination 4, if you will. Some say it's Final Destination.
Some say it's Final Destination.
Some say it's Final Destination 4. Is it Final Destination-y?
No. Fuck no. No, this movie so lazily took the formula and said no one's going to care. Rinse, wash, repeat. That's what they said. That's how they executed this. And they thought that was enough. It was enough for their wallets. We've gone over that. But I'm the movie watcher. I spend my money and my time to watch your movie. You can have all the success you want. That doesn't mean I have to say that this movie succeeded. It failed. It failed miserably. Succeeded financially, failed miserably. This is not a good Final Destination movie. It is the worst as far as I'm concerned, because out of all the ones I've seen, this is bottom of the barrel filmmaking. Can't stand it. Absolutely not.
This is absolutely not Final Destination, but what scares me about this is it kind of reminds me of films that do make a lot of money at the box office, and then the studio or producers get the idea of saying, well, we did something good with this one, let's just keep it going. Now, maybe I'll have a different judgment after I've seen Final Destination 5, because I've heard good things about that one, actually, from people I trust.
Yeah, I have too.
Who've said it. But the idea is, like, once you just give so little of a shit about a movie and it makes $187 million at the box office, you really run the danger of the studio just being like, fuck it, we'll throw anything at the screen, and they just don't care. And that's generally how franchises die, because the studio and the writers are just like, fuck it, just throw anything out there, they'll go see it. You might fool them once, but you're probably not going to fool them twice. So even if you fool them twice, you're probably not going to get them 3 times. And that's how these franchises just careen off a ledge and crash to the bottom of a ravine. And I think that's what happened here at Part 4. Now, again, I'm hoping Part 5 turns things around. And from what I've heard, having never seen the movie, it does. I don't know if it's great. I don't know if it's like the strongest film, but I've heard good things. Now, we'll find out when we watch that and review that next. But that's the danger of these kind of films. And it's happened a million times, as well as I do. And like I joke, I think I've mentioned this on past episodes of the podcast, I love the original Fast and Furious, the very first Fast and Furious. And I've actually enjoyed a lot of the other ones.
Me too.
But like it went from a street racing crew stealing DVD players from truckers to a fucking race car guy going into fucking space working for a secret government agency. How in the fuck are those in the same universe? And that's
Cars versus nuclear subs. I was in.
You just go so far off the reservation. You're just like, I don't even know what the fuck's going on here anymore. And that's kind of what it feels like with this movie. And this is only 4 in. We're not even 9 in like Fast and the Furious when they did that one. they got to Part 4 and they're just like escalators, pool filter sucking assholes. It's awesome. Let's just go with it.
Oh, this sucks ass, all right, Damon.
Yeah. So. Can you tell that we were not a fan of Final Destination? It's actually, we've said this on the show, and we've had fans reach out to us and say, we appreciate that you're just not mean-spirited for being the sake of being mean-spirited. We always appreciate those compliments. And I promise you, as cinephiles, Patrick and I never, ever try to go out of our way to be cruel. Ever. That is not what we're here to do. We've said this before. We know how hard it is to get a movie made, and we know how hard it is to make a movie. But if we sat here and tried to shine you on with something good about this movie, we would be lying to you. Lying to you.
Yes.
And I can't do that to our audience. And here's the thing. Through all this, all the insults, all the criticisms, all the laughing, all the mocking we've done of this movie, it made $187 million at the box office. Somebody won.
Who's laughing now?
Watching it. It wasn't us watching it, that's for sure. Somebody won. So you know what? They're probably listening to this saying, haha, we laugh all the way to the bank, and the guy who's driving his Porsche and the guy with the boat, They don't give a shit now. This is a decade and a half later. They don't care.
No.
But I'd be lying to you if I tried to give you the positives of a really, really bad movie.
Yeah, you're not going to hear me saying, go check this one out, folks, and decide for yourself. Go ahead if you want to. I'm not telling you to do that.
Yeah, so that is The Final Destination, or some say The Final Destination 4. Patrick, we will review Part 5 soon enough, and then, of course, in May, we will get to Bloodlines, the new film Final Destination Bloodlines, so hopefully things turn around for us. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course over at our YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us over there. Even if you don't watch us on YouTube, and I think you should watch this episode because seeing our reactions might be worth your time. Go to YouTube, just search Rewind of the Living Dead. Even if you don't watch us over there, like, subscribe, makes a huge difference for us, so please do that if you can. And then you can also find all the podcast video and audio versions over on our website, along with news, articles, reviews that we can't do on the show. Rewindofthelivingdead.com. You'll find all of that over there as well. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, your reaction to Final Destination 4 or whatever the fuck this movie's called. I would love to hear this. Send us emails, rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. Or you can find us on social media. We are on Twitter/X, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. We'd love to hear from you guys for messages, comments. Hit us up anytime. We'd love to hear from you. We always do our absolute best to try to respond. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes into the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Some say peace.